The hostess's smile vanished the moment she saw the mud-stained work boots and paint-splattered overalls walking through the elegant restaurant's front door. "I'm sorry, but we have a dress code," she said coldly to the elderly construction worker. What she didn't know was that the man she was turning away owned every brick of the building she was standing in. Frank Morrison was 68 years old, his hands calloused, his face weathered by the sun. That morning, after inspecting a new construction project on the other side of town, cement dust had settled in his hair and paint stains had marked his clothes. To anyone else, he was just another construction worker heading home after a long day's work. But Frank Morrison's story was far more complex than that. 25 years earlier, Frank had been a homeless young man living alone on the streets of Portland. He had no family, his education was incomplete, his future uncertain. Every day was a struggle for survival. He slept under bridges on cold nights, endured hunger, and fought to keep hope alive. During that time, an elderly man who had set up a small food truck downtown noticed him. Giuseppe Benedetti was an Italian immigrant who saw the determination in Frank's eyes. He gave him a chance. "Listen, son," Giuseppe had said, "I'm giving you a job. You'll clean my truck, carry supplies. In return, food and a place to stay." Frank treasured this opportunity like gold. Every day he got up early, cleaned the truck, served customers, and learned to cook from Giuseppe. In the evenings, Giuseppe taught him to read and write and explained the intricacies of business life. When Giuseppe died 2 years later, Frank was the sole owner of the small food truck. But this was just the beginning. Frank became known for his hard work, honesty, and respect for his customers. Long lines formed around his truck every day. He saved his earnings, bought new equipment, and improved his menu. 5 years later, he opened his first real restaurant, small but clean, warm but not luxurious. He named it Giuseppe's, in memory of the man who had given him a chance. Giuseppe's was a huge success. Frank's food, service, and philosophy of showing equal respect to every customer became the talk of the town. Within 2 years, he opened his second restaurant, then his third, fourth, and fifth. 20 years later, Frank Morrison was now the owner of the city's most successful restaurant chain. 5 luxury restaurants, 150 employees, millions of dollars in revenue. But he never forgot where he came from. Every week, he still personally inspected construction projects with his own hands, not just for money, but to understand working people, to see their struggles, their battles, their dreams. That Tuesday afternoon, after inspecting a housing project outside the city, Frank got in his car and headed toward downtown. Instead of going home to change his clothes, a thought occurred to him. "I wonder if we're turning people away at my restaurants because of their appearance," he wondered. This thought troubled him. The most important thing Giuseppe had taught him was to treat everyone with equal respect. But as the years passed, his luxury restaurants had focused on serving wealthier customers. Had he lost Giuseppe's values in the process? To answer this question, he wanted to go directly to his most luxurious restaurant. The Grand Giuseppe was in the heart of downtown, one of the city's most prestigious locations. Its customers were typically suited businessmen, elegantly dressed women, and wealthy families. Frank parked his car and walked to the restaurant in his construction clothes. Cement dust on his shoes, paint stains on his jacket, hands hard from work. The restaurant entrance was decorated with marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and silk curtains. Inside was full of customers, waiters serving in elegant uniforms. At the door stood hostess Miranda Stevens, about 25 years old, with perfect makeup and hair, wearing an elegant black dress. The moment she noticed Frank, the smile disappeared from her face. "Excuse me, sir," Miranda spoke in a cold voice. "Our restaurant has a dress code." Frank looked at her calmly. "I understand." What is this rule? Work clothes, sneakers, and unclean clothing are not accepted. Well, if I change these clothes, can I make a reservation? Miranda assessed Frank's age, appearance, and manner of speaking. To her, this man probably couldn't afford this restaurant's prices. Sir, our reservations are booked months in advance. And frankly, this restaurant serves a very special clientele. Frank understood. This wasn't about money. It was about class, status, and prejudice. I see. Well, can I speak with your manager? Miranda's patience ran out. Sir, please leave. We have other customers. At this point, restaurant manager James Crawford approached. He was 35 years old, suited and overly confident. When he understood what Miranda was dealing with, he intervened in the situation. What's the problem? Crawford asked in a cold voice. This gentleman wants to come in but doesn't comply with our dress code, Miranda explained. Crawford looked Frank up and down. Old work shoes, stained pants, faded work shirt. To him, this man would damage the restaurant's image. Sir, I'm sorry, but our rules apply to everyone. I'd recommend another restaurant. Which restaurant? Frank was curious. There's a diner around the corner. The prices would be more suitable, too. Frank noticed the condescension in Crawford's tone. He was making assumptions not just about his clothes, but about his economic situation. What if I can afford to pay? Crawford laughed. Sir, this is a very expensive place. Main courses on our menu range from $80 to $120. Frank pulled out his leather wallet from inside his jacket. It contained several credit cards and cash, but the wallet was old, worn, just like him. Money is not a problem, he said calmly. Crawford and Miranda looked at the wallet. It didn't look luxurious. No Rolex watch, no gold jewelry, no expensive accessories. To them, this man was trying to create an image. Sir, Crawford's tone became even harsher. Please understand, this restaurant has certain standards. We must ensure our customers are comfortable. At this point, customers inside the restaurant began to notice the situation. Conversations decreased. Heads turned, gazes focused on Frank. Several customers seemed disturbed. An elegantly dressed elderly woman shook her head with a complaining expression. This restaurant's quality is declining, the customer murmured. Now they're letting anyone in. Crawford had heard the customers. He needed to resolve the situation quickly. Would you call security? He whispered to Miranda. When Frank understood the situation, he took a deep breath. This was exactly the answer he was looking for. The restaurant had forgotten the values he had taught. No need for security, Frank said calmly. I'm leaving. As he was about to turn around, he stopped and looked at Crawford. I have a question. Who does this restaurant serve? Sir, who are your customers? What kind of people come here? Crawford didn't understand why he was asking this question. Professionals, businessmen, quality people. Quality people, Frank repeated. So a person's quality is measured by their clothes? Sir, this isn't a philosophical discussion. This is business standard. Frank nodded and headed toward the exit, but before reaching the door, he stopped. Do you know the owner of this restaurant? He asked. Crawford was surprised. Of course. Mr. Morrison is an excellent businessman. How can I reach him? Sir, Mr. Morrison is a very busy man. If you have any complaints, you can relay them to me. Frank smiled. Not a complaint. I just want to talk. Sir, please understand. At this point, Chef David Chen emerged from the restaurant kitchen. Chen had been working with Frank for 10 years and would recognize him in any condition. When he came out of the kitchen door and saw Frank, he froze. Mr. Morrison? Chen's voice was filled with surprise. Crawford and Miranda didn't understand what Chen was referring to. Who are you talking about, Mr. Morrison? Crawford asked. Chen looked at Frank and Crawford. He was beginning to understand the situation. This, Chen pointed to Frank, is Mr. Frank Morrison, owner of the restaurant chain, my boss, your boss. The restaurant fell silent. Crawford's face went white. Miranda's mouth hung open. Nearby customers had heard the conversation and were witnessing the situation. This is impossible, Crawford stammered. Chen approached and shook hands with Frank. Mr. Morrison, did you have a construction inspection today? Yes, David, for the new project. Crawford still couldn't believe it. How could this muddy, tired, ordinary-looking man be the owner of a multi-million-dollar restaurant chain? Sir, Crawford spoke in a trembling voice, I didn't know. Frank turned to Crawford. He didn't look angry. just sad. James, tell me, what is this restaurant's mission? Crawford was caught unprepared. Sir, to provide high-quality service? And to whom? To our customers? Which customers? Crawford didn't know what to say. A few minutes earlier he had said quality people. Now he was ashamed of those words. Frank raised his voice, but spoke not in an angry tone, but in an instructive one. This restaurant's name is the Grand Giuseppe. Giuseppe is the name of the man who gave me a chance. He taught me something. Every person is valuable, regardless of their clothes, money, or status. Restaurant customers were listening to the conversation carefully. There was shame in some eyes, curiosity in others. James, Miranda. Frank looked at both of them. I'm going to ask you a question. Have you ever treated any customer like this in this restaurant? Both remained silent. So the answer is yes, Frank continued. Well, when did this behavior start? Crawford gathered some courage. Sir, we're trying to protect the customer experience. As a luxury restaurant. James, Frank interrupted. What is luxury? Sir, what is luxury? Expensive food? Elegant decoration, high prices, Crawford thought. A combination of all of them, I suppose. No, Frank shook his head. True luxury is respect, showing the same respect to every customer, regardless of their situation. Frank turned around the restaurant, addressing all customers. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for affecting your dining experience this evening. One of the customers, a middle-aged woman, stood up. Sir, the woman spoke, we're not the ones you should apologize to. We were also at fault. The disrespect shown to you also shamed us. Other customers also made supportive murmurs. Frank thanked the woman, then turned to Crawford and Miranda. This is a learning opportunity for both of you, but first, tonight you will go to every customer in the restaurant and apologize. Of course, sir, Crawford responded hastily. And starting tomorrow, there will be a new policy in this restaurant. The dress code is being eliminated. Miranda was surprised. But sir, the other customer... Miranda, Frank interrupted. The problem is not that other customers are problematic, but that we are problematic. A good person means a good customer, not their clothes. Frank went to the kitchen and talked with Chen. Then he returned and approached Crawford. James, I'm going to tell you a story. 25 years ago, I was also homeless. I was starving. I had lost hope. A man named Giuseppe gave me a chance. He didn't look at my clothes. He didn't look at my status. He looked at my character. Crawford listened carefully. If Giuseppe hadn't given me that chance, we wouldn't be having this conversation today. This restaurant wouldn't exist and you wouldn't be working here. Frank stopped and looked around. Every customer carries a story. How can you judge without knowing their story? Crawford bowed his head. You're right, sir. I apologize. You don't need to apologize to me. What you need to do is act differently from now on. Before Frank left the restaurant, he thanked the customers once more, but he stopped at the door and thought, James, I'm going to make you an offer. Sir, would you like to help me in the kitchen tonight? Crawford was surprised. Sir, preparing food with Chef Chen, serving our guests. Seeing how we started, Crawford hesitated. It might seem strange for a suited executive position man to work in the kitchen. Of course, sir. Should I change my clothes? Frank smiled. Clothes don't matter, remember? That evening, Crawford worked in a restaurant kitchen for the first time in his life. He chopped vegetables, cleaned plates, carried meals. While serving each customer, he wondered who they were, what they did, their stories. A few customers at the end of the evening wanted to extend their stay to talk with Frank. They listened to his story, congratulated him, appreciated him. A customer approached Frank. Mr. Morrison, I'm very glad to hear your story. I also went through very difficult times once, but no one ever gave me a chance. You are a different person. Frank had a long conversation with that customer. He learned about past difficulties, how he stayed on his feet, future plans. When the restaurant was closing, Crawford approached Frank. Mr. Morrison, I learned a lot tonight. What did you learn? That every person has a story, and my job is not to judge those stories, but to show them respect. Frank nodded. That's right. I learned one more thing. Crawford continued. True leadership is not punishing people, but teaching them. How so? You could have fired me, you could have embarrassed me, but instead you taught me. Frank smiled. Crawford, I think you're a good person. You just had bad habits. What about Miranda? Frank looked at Miranda. The young woman had worked quietly all evening, apologizing to customers, trying to correct her behavior. Miranda, I'm going to ask you a question too. Yes, sir. What did you learn from what you experienced today? Miranda thought that I shouldn't judge people by their appearance, and how wrong my prejudices can be. Anything else? That showing respect to people has nothing to do with their status or wealth. Frank was pleased. Miranda, I want to give you a new assignment. Sir? You're now the customer relations manager of this restaurant. Your special duty is to ensure every customer feels special. Rich or poor, young or old, it doesn't matter. Miranda was surprised and delighted. Really, sir? Thank you so much. But I have one condition. Frank added. What is it? Every month, at least once, you'll organize free meal service for people living in difficult life conditions. You'll open this restaurant's doors to everyone. Miranda nodded with sparkling eyes. What a great idea. 3 months later, the Grand Giuseppe became one of the most talked about restaurants in the city, but not just for its delicious food, but for the equal respect it showed to all customers. Local newspapers wrote Frank's story. Articles titled From Homelessness to Millions Deeply Affected People. Crawford, in addition to restaurant management, enrolled in a life coaching certification program. He began to develop himself in empathy with people and recognizing prejudices. The monthly free meal program organized by Miranda started a movement in the city. Other restaurants also began organizing similar programs, but the most important change was within Frank. That day he had tested whether he had forgotten his own values, and unfortunately he had forgotten. But now he had remembered Giuseppe's teachings again. 6 months later, Frank announced a new policy for all restaurants in his company. Every story matters. This policy not only eliminated dress codes, but also ensured that staff received empathy training, respected customer stories, and recognized prejudices. One day, Frank went to the Grand Giuseppe again, this time not with clean clothes, but again with construction clothes. But now no one stopped him. Crawford greeted him, Miranda directed him inside, Chef Chen prepared a special table. And that evening, as Frank sat at the table in the middle of the restaurant, he looked around and smiled. There were different people at every table. Suited businessmen, casually dressed students, elderly couples, young families. All were being welcomed with the same respect, all receiving the same quality service. A waiter came to him. Mr. Morrison, what would you like to eat tonight? Do you know what Giuseppe's favorite dish was? Spaghetti and meatballs, sir. Simple but perfect when made right. Let it be so. While Frank ate his meal, he thought, Giuseppe had not only taught him to cook, he had taught him life, humanity, and seeing the value within every person. And now he was teaching this to others too, because true success is not measured by how much money you make, but by how many people's lives you touch. And true leadership is not judging people, but understanding them. If you enjoyed this story, click the like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next story.